Thanks for joining us. In this week's fun fact, criminals don't want to get shot.
That is right. Criminals don't want to get shot, which kind of ends up begging the question, right? I mean, if I don't want to get shot, I am going to go to a place where I can't get shot.
Like a gun-free zone?
That is correct. And this is kind of one of these topics, Rick, that we have to keep circling back around to. It's kind of a shame because we have so many statistics that, maybe we can go over a little bit later, but I think the best place to really start here is what is the actual definition of a mass shooting?
Well, and I think the reason that is so important to discuss is a lot of us tend to think at this time of the year in the fall is, well, the legislature has went on recess, thank God, because the kids went home and they're not messing with us. But they are still messing with us, and we're going to talk about that throughout the fall and ways they do it and break that down and unpack it for you. And unpacking gun-free zones and politicians and their behavior, it comes down to definitions.
But there is no definition, and this is kind of where we run into some problems. And maybe you can enlighten me here. One of the definitions that I've heard for a mass shooting is anywhere that 3 or more people have been shot.
That is one definition. There's another definition, Kevin, that the government also goes to when it's convenient, and that is when 4 or more people get shot, but wait, not in the same place. And I don't mean on their body. I mean like, one gets shot in the morning over at this location, and a couple hours later somebody else gets shot at another location, which that all of a sudden is a mass shooting. Well, to me, that's funny because when Al Capone and his gang were roaming the streets and doing food services and knocking off a couple people here or there, that was never a mass shooting. But all of a sudden today, that can be a mass shooting.
So this can become very advantageous politically if you are advocating to stop mass shootings. And this is kind of something that we just continue to see in Second Amendment politics, is that we're going to continue and change the definition so that we can advocate on something that we know creates an emotional response from people. And so that we can continue and tie this to our argument to continue and crack down on Second Amendment rights and freedoms.
And I think you hit a very key point, the emotional argument. And I think one of the things that we have to, and I hate using this word, but it's appropriate, unpack is the emotional argument. The emotional argument for all of us to realize is that the more the extreme left can place on us that we are gun owners and gun owners don't care about human life and they don't care about mass shootings, it's not fair. We as gun owners, we as the California Rifle Pistol Association, for over almost a century and a half now, have been teaching firearm safety, how to prevent people from not only dying, but from actually ever getting hurt using a tool known as a firearm. And Kevin, you're absolutely right. They try to frame the debate that the minute we say that's not true, that they can label us in the press as saying, well, see, they don't care about the loss of life. No, I don't care if you say Sandy Hook, Parkland, Aurora, San Bernardino, any of those places. Those are tragic days. Those people can't get their lives back. Their family and friends will never fully recover. All of us understand that. Our heart breaks for everything, and it was just anything we could have done to stop it. But that's what I want to look at with you today is, what are the politicians actually doing? Paying lip service or stopping it?
Well, I mean, our politicians have taken such a drastic turn from what they were originally meant to be. Okay, we have founding fathers who were against the idea of what you would call a career politician. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, it's a little bit different, and I'm sorry to drag it off topic here, but there's a great example. We just were plugged into the Orange County Fair Board meeting, where Senator Min got on touting his bill, Senate Bill 264. He was even allotted more time than the average person to speak. That guy got on there and started reading off of his piece of paper all of his political talking points, and he went over his time, and the Fair Board members kept trying to butt in, saying, hey, okay, your time is up. There was no respect for that Fair Board from Senator Min at that meeting. He was there to do one thing and one thing only, tout his political points, make sure that his voters knew how he stood on his topics, and that was it. He was completely disrespectful to that fair board. He was completely disrespectful to everybody else who was supposed to only have 3 minutes to speak, but that's because he has one agenda and one agenda only. That's to get reelected. Let's not forget about this. His agenda really has nothing to do with firearms. His agenda is to continue and provide for his family by collecting a paycheck paid for by the citizens by getting reelected. He's out there looking for votes, and that's where a lot of this legislation actually comes from. They want to scare people, and they're going to scare people by talking about death. And when people don't look into the actual consequences of this legislation, and that's what we really need to look into right now, is the statistics in the consequences from these pieces of legislation. But he's not actually worried about that. He's worrying about getting those votes. And when people only look at the headline, the Safety Act, we talk about this a lot. We're safety, 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 when really we're just disarming.
And making us less safe.
Right. And here's my plea again, Rick. Education.
Right.
We need to educate our neighbors, and that's what it's going to come down to. But let's roll back here. So the consequences. Okay, what are the actual consequences of taking firearms out of the hands of individuals? Because I can tell you, the CDC, and a lot of people might know what the CDC is now more than they did 3 years ago, because we've been following CDC guidelines for COVID for 2 years now.
Which, just in case they don't, that's Center for Disease Control.
Right, Center for Disease Control. Well, guess what? They do a lot more than tell us to put on a mask. They actually review data from reports every single year on defensive handgun uses, people protecting themselves, their property, and their family and their lives. Between 500,000 and 3 million defensive handgun uses a year in the United States.
Well, this year we're over 800,000 already.
It's already over 800,000 this year. So if you want to talk about consequences of taking firearms out of the hands of people, creating gun-free zones, what you're talking about is taking away 800,000 opportunities for people to defend themselves every single year. I know the statistic that likes to get shouted is, the firearm, the death rate every year. What about the successes of having a firearm?
Well, exactly. I mean, when you're talking about 800,000 uses of a firearm to prevent and save lives, we have to break that down into two different areas. One is the tool, being the firearm, and then the success rate, as you said. And when you look at the success rate, you have to seriously consider that is, if that tool had not been present, we could be looking at 800,000 families that were negatively impacted because someone was either seriously injured, has at the very least PTSD for the rest of their life. If not, they're no longer here, or multiple people, because we don't know on those 800,000 if they're defending one person or several people. We do know on a couple of those there was several people, like somebody uses a firearm, like happened in the Midwest, and the bad guy goes, oh no, and runs out of the Walmart and doesn't commit the act because of that person. So who knows how many people could have lost their lives had that not been there. But I also think you have to go back to the tool. And, I'm not making light. A firearm is a tool. And, get away from my firearms, going to my garage where I have tools. I have tools that, for the most part, could be very deadly, like a screwdriver, but it's innocuous. At the most, I might cut myself if it slips when I'm doing something. A hammer, I could actually break a thumb or something if I'm not watching what I'm doing. My battery-operated saw, I could lose my hand if I'm not watching what I'm doing. But at the end of the day, they're all tools. They could be misused, and some people do, as we know from FBI stats, especially with hammers. Guys, be warned. It's not a safe thing if your wife has a hammer or your significant other has a hammer when you go to sleep. But, more people die from that than they do from AR-15s, just saying. But, you also have to take it very seriously that with that tool, remove the tool and remove the purposes that was designed for. Those were designed as a defensive tool. And when people try to make it offensive, it's really wrong. It's like, one of the things I tell people all the time when you're looking at politics and looking at laws that people are pushing, politicians, before again breaking down the gun-free zone, going back to what you said, politicians look up there and say, hey, we had this horrible thing, and we need to get rid of, let's just take the classic AR-15s, because they're responsible, Kevin. Seriously, I remember our own Kevin De Leon in this state going, they're responsible for all these people dying. Yes, AR-15s have been misused. Never going to deny that. And yes, those people should have never had it. And I will also remark that there were several failures, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but go back to the study that happened in 2014, and it showed in 142, quote, mass shootings in that year, by the loosey-goosey definitions, 62%, 62, that's doggone 2/3, were done with handguns. Handguns. And I believe it was roughly 20% of those were done with shotguns, which meant just slightly less than a quarter were done with rifles. And of those, all the rifles were not AR-15s. A lot of them were just regular rifles. Yeah, if you look at the political response, they know they'll lose votes, like you said earlier. If men wanted to take away handguns, a lot of the people in the Democratic Party, independents, Republicans, etc., because the Constitution doesn't belong to a party, have handguns. And they would lose their mind if somebody wanted to take their handguns away. So what do? They focus on making one firearm evil, but if it was really focused about life, which is what the argument you hear me make all the time in public, then you'd be going after that. The other thing is, let's bring this back to a national debate, something I've talked about before. Folks, do not forget, these are the people that are still, over a month later, silent on the fact that the President of the United States gave away, and we're finding with breaking news that even the military is like, please do not pull out of Afghanistan. Please keep 2,000 to 4,000, troops there. Oh, no, not only did we pull out the troops, but we gave them billions of dollars worth of hardware to use against us, and over 7,000 fully automatic firearms that could be easily transported to the United States. But what makes you safe, Kevin? Taking yours away.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a popular sentiment that one of the reasons why, we as a country haven't necessarily been invaded is because of the population that we have. We are the most dense population of firearms in the world. And that is something to behold, for sure. And I think that that's a fair point. If you're looking at this logically, there's no other conclusion that you can come to that it's political. This is not about saving lives. This is purely about getting votes and having ultimate control. Because if somebody can't defend themselves, they're going to have to submit. This is what we were founded on, and they are trying to erode it. No, they're not going to go over, they're not going to go over and try and take away our handguns immediately, at least. They're going to target the scary looking gun, the militaristic looking gun that is going to be easy for people to say, well, yeah, why don't you need that? Now, I mean, maybe we can make an entirely other video about the argument you don't need that because we don't need cars.
Right.
We don't need houses. We don't need fences. We don't need any of this to actually live. All we need is water and a little bit of food. So,
well, I mean, Kevin, come on. You can take the family on a long hike to Florida. You can take a train. You can take a bus. So we don't need planes. The only people that should have planes are the military. And I'll give you a couple of reasons why, to apply the democratic logic of Washington, D.C. Lower carbon footprint. People can take longer, see more of America, spread the economy around. Come on.
Yeah, and these are ridiculous sentiments, but the argument does seem to circle back a lot to you don't need something. But this is America, so please don't tell me what I need. Because if I have the means and I have the ability, it shouldn't be about what I need. That's neither here nor there. I think it is fair pointing out, though, the fact that so many of these instances happen in gun-free zones. Not even mass shootings, just crimes in general.
Well, and I think you have to go back to, we're humans, and rather you've been in the military or not been in the military or plan to be someday. For those of you who have served or are serving, thank you. And I say that as a veteran, but let's move forward on this. When you're attacking an enemy position, you look for their weakest point. And what do I mean by the weakest point? Not just the point that you can break down their defenses and get in and achieve the goal, but the one where you lose the least number of people on your side while inflicting the most damage on their side. So let's go back here in California. Go back a few years ago. It's around the holidays, and we have a horrific shooting in San Bernardino. You and I both know Sheriff McMahon, who's the sheriff at the time, like great gentleman, doing great business, great work. The people who committed the act of violence that day said, you know what? Let's attack here. You know why? Gun-free zone. They knew that nobody would have anything to defend themselves, so they walk in with their firearms to wreak massive damage. And you could go, well, that's a one-off. Go to Aurora, Colorado. And the young man who had lots of mental issues, there were lots of warnings in the system that never got addressed, all the failures of the system psychologically that should have prevented several things from happening. Professors that knew the guy had a proclivity for explosives and trying to set up trap bombs and stuff, which he did in his apartment. He specifically testified, yeah, there were several theaters, but a lot of those allowed people to carry CCW firearms, so I chose the one that didn't. Again, gun-free zone. And you can go over and over and over again. You don't have to have this debate that people want to pull it out in the colleges of like, well, let's define a gun-free zone and let's see how true that is. Okay, the absolute worst, Donald Trump, love him, hate him, doesn't really matter in this argument. You know, the left press wanted to make a really big thing out of like, well, he said 90+% of the, incidences were gun-free zones. And Moms That Demand Action, of course, leans the other way, 10%. And a group that was in the center said, well, let's go check out who's right, them or that. Okay, President Trump, yeah, it's 85%. Okay, wait. So he's 5 to 10% off. Yeah, that's not cool, but it's still saying well over 3/4 of the time when someone decides to take multiple lives, they literally plan to do it in a gun-free zone.
Again, the appeal to logic here. I mean, no matter what you're trying to do, if you're not supposed to be doing it, of course you're going to look for the path of least resistance. Yeah. Okay, we've seen this. You know what? We've seen this recently in San Francisco. They came out and said that they weren't going to prosecute crimes under $1,000. So what did you get?
Irregular shopping.
Not only irregular shopping, you had people not from San Francisco coming to San Francisco to do the irregular, as you put it, shopping.
Right.
Okay.
Which is shoplifting, for the record.
Right. So, I mean, this shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. And you know what? It shouldn't be a surprise to the politicians either. Going back to the big picture, I mean, if you are going to advocate for something, I mean, make it poverty, make it gun violence, make it anything. Okay, if you're going to advocate for something and you're looking to be a career politician and you end that something that you're advocating for in 2 years, what are you going to campaign on next time? So is it really about ending gun violence? Or is it about maybe let's create some legislation that people who I know will vote for me will read the tagline saying gun safety and vote for me again next year? Because guess what? If gun violence is ended next year, I'm not going to get that person's vote.
Well, do you want me to go there?
I kind of want you to go there.
All right, so let's break this part down. If you look at places like Moms That Demand Action stuff, they're financed by billionaires. Billionaires have learned how to make money by getting people in a capitalist society to be fear or have a sense of loss to purchase whatever product they're selling. So when they create these nonprofits, they create machines. And you got to realize most of the time they cherry pick a person that was literally a nobody in society and overnight tried to use the media to make them a sensation. So we can look to the Moms That Demand Action Group in San Diego. They're supposed to be in San Diego, but as we're seeing, they're in Orange County, they're in Ventura, they're all over the place. Do you think they really want to end gun violence? And they would be appalled at what I'm going to say. I will argue no, because that's how they make a living. They make a living by continuing to change the terms so that they have something out there that they can say, give me money. And when you look at their 990s, you look at how much these people are getting paid. These are not poor people. These are not people. It's a game. It's a show. I mean, you and I just watched at the Orange County Fair Board meeting. All that happened was we tabled this item to talk about later the year. Tabled. Tabled is not a win, a loss. It's not even a tie. It just means, hey, like you say to your spouse, your roommate, your best friend, let's talk about that on another day. It's not even let's agree to disagree. It's just let's talk about that on a different day. We got to go get dinner. That's all it is. What does she do? She does the freaking happy dance in front of the media cameras. The minute the media cameras shut off, guess who's not happy dancing? Her. That wasn't real. That wasn't like, oh, look at this moment of just, that was show business. It's not about saving lives.
You know, in 2016, I actually went to a Moms Demand Action meeting. One of the questions that I put on their table is, where do you guys stand on the governor signing a bill to release violent criminals from prison?
Right.
They looked at me and they said they had no stance. I looked back and said, well, do you think that they don't use firearms? And they said that that's not within their purview. They're going to continue and celebrate their victories. Cherry picked. So, I mean, this is an issue. And I also don't want to brush lightly over that comment that you made, because they tend to. I've seen people go into fair board meetings, city council meetings, and say, well, I'll let you know when I receive a check from George Soros. The fact of the matter is these billionaires who seek to create, use their influence around, in not just the United States, by the way,
right,
around the entire world, you're not going to receive a check directly from him, but he will pour millions and billions of dollars into subsidiary companies that then make donations to organizations like Moms Demand Action. If you don't think that is intentional, an intentional delineation of that person's money, you're kind of crazy, because that's exactly what it is.
Well, and it's not that covert. As we've said in an earlier show, we demonstrated to the public, because we got a lot of people that called in and said, well, prove what you're saying. And we did. We showed how Moms Demand Action up in the Bay Area used a study. The study came from a group that they used, which was financed by Everytown, which openly says they're financed by Bloomberg. So for them to say, oh, we never get a check or anything from them, there's the proof right there. Yes, granted, they do it through step 1, 2, 3, 4. But the fact is, I find it ironic that if I get a benefit check from Donald Trump when he was president, well, Rick, Donald Trump paid you off. Well, no. Donald Trump said something to Congress. Congress said something to Treasury. Treasury said something to the IRS. IRS said something to my bank, and then I got money. Oh, no. That came from here. But when it's reversed, they'll go, well, I didn't get a direct check. Stop.
Well, and I think that this is sort of the difference between
by the way, I also got one of those checks from Biden. Just saying.
I think this is kind of one of the difference between the groups, okay? California Rifle and Pistol Association, we want to save lives. We happen to have a belief here that a firearm within the hands of somebody who, is trained and knows how to operate it safely will save lives. But make no mistake about it, the opposition is a political tactic. It is not necessarily a belief, because if it were a belief, these organizations would be coming out and speaking out against, Fast and Furious. They would be speaking out against Biden leaving firearms in Afghanistan. They would be out lobbying about the California Apps program that
I'm glad you went there.
That just told us that that's been up to 23,000 people.
Yep.
So let me get this straight.
And people that are prohibited, people that aren't allowed to have firearms, that they know have firearms, and they're not arresting them.
So let's break that down for a second, okay? You're gonna spend your time and effort to lobby the Orange County Fair Board to end gun shows because of the possibility that a prohibited person might go to that show and potentially buy a firearm.
Oh, no. Wait, and I hate to jump in on this, but I'm going to. After going after Senator Min, after multiple, what I mean by multiple, 10 distinctly different Public Records Acts requests for him to produce multiple times in front of the Assembly and Senate being called on, produce your facts of people who have went to that fairgrounds and they have purchased firearms and used them in a crime, of which the Sheriff's Department and everybody else says hasn't happened in over 25 years. Nothing. But we have a fact that the California DOJ says at any given time in the past few years, 22 to 23,000 people, as you said, that are armed, prohibitive people are felons. They know where they live and generally speaking, the firearms that they have, and we don't go on and arrest them. And moms that demand action, every town in USA that says they want to protect you, your children, your loved ones from violent people with firearms that are out to do harm. Well, what's more violent than a felon that's already been arrested, prosecuted, and incarcerated for doing just that? And we know where tens of thousands of them are, and we're doing nothing about it. Nothing.
It's like
that goes to
yeah.
show you that it's just rhetoric. When the California Rifle Pistol Association says we're trying to move the ball towards public safety, we put on classes statewide, we go out and talk to people, we provide education, we provide venues, we do everything to encourage safety. You and I don't know how many times I stood in front of a crowd and said, it's not about you having a firearm, it's about choice. And having that choice, if you choose to do it, being responsible. Where is that talk on the other people? If they really were trying to do it, they'd be on our side. But instead, I will say it, they're borderline, in my mind, racist because they're trying to remove firearms from people who are impoverished, from people that don't have the ability. And you do not sit there on the left and say, oh, well, law enforcement's not doing their job. They're not in low-income neighborhoods. They're not in neighborhoods where there's single moms. And so those people are being unprotected and law enforcement's just bad. When law enforcement says, A, we don't have the money, B, we don't have enough people, and oh, wait, your solution is in, and also let's not let those people have firearms to defend themselves. Let's leave them totally vulnerable as a gun-free zone.
Because what happens when you're vulnerable?
You become dependent on a government that lies to you. You know, to sum up everything that we've talked about today, Kevin, with gun-free zones and the political rhetoric surrounding them, I think the easiest talking point I would give a person is like this. When you're a kid, you get that first night, happens at different points where you got scared. And immediately, if you had a rotten sibling who said, ooh, it's the boogeyman, then even when your mom or dad or aunt or uncle, whoever you were with that night happened, came in and said, there is no such thing as a boogeyman, how long did you go in the back of your head, but there could be a boogeyman. There might be a boogeyman. And you look under your bed, every time you hear something go off, that during the day means nothing, like the tree hitting your window, but at nighttime, boogeyman. That's exactly the same game that politicians play with the populace to try to move us, is they try to scare us. And what we're here is, we're not trying to be hyperbolic and make you afraid of something. We're trying to break this down so folks, you can break it down to the people in your family. Do not allow the boogeyman mentality of the government to control you.
You know, there's lots of positives and negatives in the California legislature, but you know what's always positive? A like on this video. So be sure and like, share, and subscribe. Make sure and hit that little bell so that you can stay tuned for all of our future videos. You can also check us out on Facebook and at crpa.org. If you're looking for up-to-date legislature notes and things that are going on in the courts, the website and these videos are a great place to find it. So be sure and follow us, and we'll see you next time.